Hello, and welcome to this episode of Catching the Octopus Podcast. I'm Niomi Hurley, and today I wanted to talk a little bit around something that's a bit controversial, but around kind of the Epstein files and what's that exposing in the world around us. In today's podcast, there is a trigger warning because I am going to talk about sexual abuse, child sexual abuse, and violent situations. So if you want to continue listening, you can continue listening. I'm a victim of child SA, so I've seen some elements of the systems and know their downfalls, and I kind of feel that there's probably intention behind the information they're sharing, which is really dark. And the information they're sharing, even though they've redacted a lot of the abusers from that and not redacted some of the victims, which they should have, you know, that they're actually doing things to play with our minds. It's kind of like a psychological warfare. And if you haven't already investigated what's in those files, it's pretty dark. There's, you know, eating children references. There's references of starving babies and then using their members as pacifiers for those babies, even statements where they've like played the mum's voice so that the baby tries harder to get milk or to be soothed. There's references of deaths where they've actually ended the lives of children that they've abused. Some of the children have made their way into adulthood, but many, many others haven't. And it was allowed through a system of, oh, I've got your back. Right? Like these powerful men, majority of them that are listed are men in these files that are doing these crimes. And they get into a space where they feel like they're going to get away with it. And the reason why they feel like that is because they're surrounded by other people that either turn a blind eye or are that doing them themselves. And even in my instance, there was a big case of people turning a blind eye. Now, from my understanding, they were all women that knew about it, that turned a blind eye and allowed that to happen. And even when I was going into the court system, you know, my mum reached out to my auntie and asked if my cousin would testify, because back when I went to court for the stuff that happened to me, they needed a witness. So asking for my cousin to testify would have then given a witness statement, and my auntie said, no, I don't want to put my daughter through that. Now, that's her right as a parent to make that decision, but the complicity that was within the space of not wanting to hold this man accountable and not wanting to speak out about the atrocities that he'd created, and then also through the court system, how it was set up to, in a way, protect him over protecting me. And you know, I had an array of medical evidence that was presented to the court. In fact, there was so many problems that I was having, regular problems, that there was talk. Now, I've been told this, I was a child, so I don't remember the conversation directly, but I've been told this, that the doctors were actually looking at doing exploratory surgery on my reproductive system to see what could be causing these ongoing issues, because they just couldn't pinpoint why I was having so many problems. And that exploratory surgery would have then basically broken my hymen, would have done a whole heap of other damage. And it just by chance happened to be that I spoke up about it before I had to have that surgery done. So the court system then as well painted me out to be an attention seeker, that I was making up this story for attention. Like, why is a child going to make up stuff like that? Anyway, and he got off. He did not get charged, even though they had all the medical evidence. And the kicker was I had to be, I think it was 11, to be able to go under, like swear on the Bible or be under oath while I was giving my testimony. And because I was younger than that, that wasn't possible. So the system was set up to say, hey, if they're young victims, we'll actually give these people a loophole to get out of it. And in Australia, just this week, this is in the country I live in Australia, there was a nurse that was caught with category 5 images of child SA, and apparently category 1 is just with clothing removed, category 5 is penetration. So he had those images. He was caught. He was then taken, charged, put in front of a judge. And instead of getting jail time, I believe it was up to 8 years jail time he could have got for that offence, he was let out. Now, this guy's a nurse. So he has access to children in his job. And, the way the system is set up to protect these abusers just shows that the abusers sit within the system. And this has been shown and is evident through the Epstein files in what they're actually bringing out. It's not just in America, it's worldwide. And it's absolutely disgusting. And I know I'm getting a bit passionate about this because I feel like the reason why they've released this stuff is they're trying to desensitize us. And like I said, there was people in my circle that knew about it that did nothing because it was normalized for them, right? In their minds, this was just something that happened. There was nothing they could do to change it. And that's what they're trying to do with releasing these files. They're telling us this horrific, horrible details of what they're doing to children. And little boys, little girls, they're doing this to children and they're telling us that they do it and no one's doing anything about it. Right? And no one's doing anything about it. And then it's being desensitized. We're talking about it over coffee. I mean, I went out for dinner last week and it was a conversation at our table and we were talking about it. Yes, we were completely disgusted, but the more you talk about something, the more familiar it becomes. The brain likes what's familiar, right? It feels like that's safe. And so psychologically, they're trying to make this common practice for us or a common knowledge that this happens so that they can start trying to normalize it. Even in America, they've got about abortion laws banned, abortion laws that ban abortions, right? And if you look at the files, a lot of the way they got their victims, yes, there was grooming, yes, there was all those sorts of things, but they were from poverty areas a lot of the times, children that were living in poverty, parents that were either working a lot trying to make ends meet or probably weren't as attentive as they should have been. They're also getting children from the welfare system, right? So they're now even bringing it into policy, right? Stopping women from having the right to choose what happens with their body, which results then in more children then possibly being adopted or put into foster care systems because the women may not be set up in a way that they want to be to raise those children. And then those children then become an endless pile of victims, right? So they're writing it into policy. I even had in Australia again in the last week that I've heard that there was a lawyer, quite an established lawyer, that actually took his own life that had a whole heap of child pornographic material, right, that they'd found. And so there's people that are meant to be protecting us and going into court and talking on behalf of us, they're in the system as well. And I don't know what I can do about it. And that's the most painful part is I think to myself, many years after I went to court, didn't have to see my abuser again. I think I was about 18. I went to a family member's funeral and then I went to the wake afterwards. And as I pulled in the driveway, my abuser pulled in beside me and I had my first and only ever anxiety attack. I was hyperventilating. I couldn't breathe. I was at a point where I thought that I'd actually moved past everything that happened to me, but my body was just like, yeah, nah, this is not safe. This person is not safe. And it reacted in a way trying to protect me. And so I think too, especially this case in America with the Epstein files, where they're having to see, many of them, their abuser leading the, I'm just going to swear, leading the fucking country, right? Has been elected in to lead the country and having to see all of the time the talk about the files, reliving those moments, having to watch other powerful people that abuse them as well, getting away with it without being held accountable, holding positions of power, influencing policy. I couldn't imagine how hard that must be for them every day having to relive what happened to them. And we aren't angry enough. We aren't mad enough. We aren't upset enough. There are other countries that their politicians are standing down and resigning and stuff because they've been implicated in the files. And that's kind of great in a way. That's one step. But where's the real accountability? why in our Western culture do we value the placement of these people that are abusers over the pain and trauma that their victims go through? This even leads into the DV space, right? As well, the women that are having their lives taken from them are usually when they leave a DV situation. A lot of the times they've actually reported it. A lot of the times there's AVOs in place that aren't being monitored, but there's no real hard laws that actually say, hey, this is not good enough. Like, if you're going to be out there perpetrating violence towards someone, then you get locked up. You don't get a restraining order and still allowed to roam the streets. And then if they can't take out their partner, they take out their partner's friends and family. Like, it's just, the whole system is ridiculous. And from my space, I'm, looking at prospective partners in a dating environment, and it scares me to think that this patriarchal system has set up for me to be unsafe. And I've been lucky that I've stumbled across people that understand that and have made accommodations for me and have made actually me feel like I am safe in those spaces. But I'm one of the lucky ones. And even after my history and what I've told you about the abuse that I did survive, I still feel like I'm one of the lucky ones. And I mean, I don't have the answers. I don't know exactly what we can do. But I also know that I can't sit here silently and complacently listen to this stuff without at least speaking up. But I'm just disgusted. I'm dismayed. When Trump first got voted in, I cried. I was in a depressed emotional state for days afterwards. I even had to go see a friend who did a whole heap of energy healing with me, because I already knew that he'd had these accusations. I already knew that he'd been charged for these things, had put payouts and hush money for these kinds of things, and he still got voted in. And I suppose as well, being a woman, I feel like my voice isn't as loud as men out there. And then when I see men out there that aren't speaking up and aren't creating the change, that are happy just to go day to day, even though they feel like it's not their responsibility, it's all of our responsibility to protect children, to protect innocent people from, I'm not going to call them monsters because they're men, from these men. And, as I said, when he first got voted in, I was in total disarray of trying to understand how something like that can happen, how our society and our community could allow that to happen. Now, that was before the Epstein files come out, and now I realize that it happens because they're all protecting each other and helping each other. They're all giving each other a leg up. They're all giving each other opportunities to be in positions of power, to earn a lot of money, which then puts them in powerful positions as well. And it's a big global ring that we're doing nothing about. There's so many creators out there that are reading the files and sharing the information. And look, full disclaimer, I'm big on researching everything. I like to, if something comes across my feed that's political or something that comes across that's adversarial, I'll go and actually research it. I can't bring myself to look at those files. I just know that I've got my own trauma, right? My own triggers. And so I think I'm protecting myself. But I just know that I'm not psychologically set up to be able to look at those files and that not change me. And so I'm kind of unfortunately riding off the backs of these creators that do have the strength to go and do that. And I worry for them, because I worry about the things that they're reading and the things that they're seeing and the things that they're hearing about when they're investigating these files and how all the connections work. There's also a gentleman named Sasha Riley who gave some interviews about his interactions and his experience and life in the pedophile ring and the people that he came into contact with, and nothing's done. There's numerous, countless other victims that have spoken up and nothing's done. And I think that's probably the most frustrating space, because I've been one of those people that spoke up and nothing was done. And I think if we can switch our minds to actually just, if we believe the victims, and we don't need to have a pile of evidence. I mean, I know we do to go into the courts and things like that, but their statements, their medical records, the fact that other adults know what's happening should be enough. So my abuser walked free, and he's not alive anymore, but he walked free. And the detectives on the case said to my parents and that, you know, don't worry, he'll be watched now. Like, they'll keep an eye on him. But now that I'm older, in my head, I'm like, well, who's watching him? Are other pedophiles watching him? Are the people that make our laws and set up our systems that support this kind of behavior, are they the ones that are watching him? Like, it doesn't give me any feeling or sense that that was okay. It's actually a very big misjustice. And I feel like that is part of why I have such a strong moral compass now, is because, and also probably why I'm so honest in the communications that I have with people, is I, at that such young age, was in a room full of adults. Many of them I didn't know, many of them quite intimidating. Many of them, it's one of them at least, questioning me with questions, trying to trip me up and try and trip up my story and accusing me of being a liar. And I'm not a liar. And there's no way I would have just made that stuff up. As I've now started processing this, so my journey on processing this more came last year. And as I started processing this, I've now started realizing more about the adults in my sphere that I believe knew about it and did nothing. They let it happen. And in some cases were actually facilitating, I don't know if it's the right word, but facilitating it, setting up an environment where I was at risk. And they were okay doing that. And that's a really hard pill to swallow. And so then starting this journey last year, or probably a couple of years ago, but more last year, of having conversations with people around this and explaining to them and trying to get some clarity. There was a denial that they did know, but there's too many facts that line up that I had to say to them, look, you know, in my mind you did, and now I have to process that, and you have to give me time to process that. As a psychologist, or as a psychology trained person, I'm not qualified registered psychologist, but as a qualified psychology graduate and all of my study around human behavior and those sorts of things, I understand why they let that happen. As a parent, as a woman, as a member of the community, I fucking don't, and I never will, understand how people can allow children to be hurt and not do anything about it. And so I know this podcast episode goes a little bit off kilter on what I'm normally talking about. I'm normally talking about positive thinking and getting yourself into a space. But I think sometimes as well, we need to visit these realities, these harsh realities of what is happening around us. You know, it wasn't just the child SA that I suffered as a woman, and many, many women in my sphere have stories as well that they can tell you. I experienced derogatory comments, unwanted touch. You know, when I was a teenager, about 15, my dad worked in a male-dominated environment. He went to sea and he was on different kinds of vessels, container vessels, oil tankers, those sorts of things. And when I would go visit him, the nickname that the crew had given me was cherry ripe, the age of 15. It was laughed about. Now we can say, oh, it was a different time back then, but that's actually the reality, right? Like, as we've evolved as a society, this still happens, but it's more underlying. Like, it's still there. It's something that really concerns me as well, because, you know, I have nieces, I have a daughter, I have friends that have daughters, and I know it does happen to boys as well. I'm not taking away from that, but other than the specific child SA that I encountered and was a victim of, the rest of my life has really been more about just being a woman in a man's world, is the best way that I can describe it. And the painful part is having to have some level of acceptance about that to be able to operate within this world. I spent most of my career, I'm not going to say male-dominated environments anymore, male gate-kept environments, right? Environments that men just wanted to keep to be for men and make it difficult to women to come into. And then when they do, they just, you know, verbally disparage them. They make jokes about things that are inappropriate, you know, all the things that, you know, if you talk to the men in the workplace, that they're kind of going, oh, it's ruined it now. We can't have our magazines on the walls, and we can't make jokes, and we can't be pigs pretty much anymore, because we have to actually be humans. We have to have morals. We have to show up in a space that makes it safe for people that we actually don't feel deserve that safety. You know, it's our work environment. If you don't like it, don't come and work here. Like, I've been a part of all of that. I've even had to investigate harassment within the workplace. And I've been disappointed in myself sometimes that I didn't stick up more for the women because of the conditioning that I received. If I was there now, it'd be a different story, I could tell you. But at the time, I was conditioned by patriarchy as well. To be, well, if you're in this environment, there's some stuff you kind of just have to put up with. We shouldn't have to put up with it. Our children shouldn't have to put up with it. No one should have to put up with being assaulted, made to feel unsafe, intimidated. And especially, we shouldn't have to watch those people that are the abusers rise to position of power and have no accountability for what they've done. If you've stuck around this long, thank you very much. Like I said, I know it is a bit off theme for how I usually have my podcast episodes and the content I put in them. But for myself, I really felt like it was important for me to speak up about this. So hopefully now, you know, do some energy cleansing, try and defrag from this, listen to a really happy song, do whatever you need to do to try and cleanse some of the energy that you've probably picked up from this episode. I know I'm going to go do that now. And I look forward to serving you again in my next episode.